The Vikings schedule is out, so what can we learn from it? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network. Today on the show, it is schedule release day. So if you need to know anything about the schedule, I'm going to have everything for you. I'll read it out for you. We'll go over what it is, what it means, and how the Vikings made out on schedule day. Obviously, we know the opponents the second the season ends. We know that the Vikings are going to play the Colts, that they're going to go, at 49ers, although that one goes international. We know they're going to travel to New England and play the Patriots and get the Dolphins at home and all that, all on a rotation or based on the end of the season standings. So that's like strength of schedule and what, win-loss you're supposed to get and all that. All is stuff you can theoretically predict more or less after the draft. Not a lot of movement happens. Sometimes a Jawan Jennings signing happens, but that's kind of about it. So what we learned today is what order these come in, where everybody's bye is, where the big road trips are, the international games, of course, and the kind of rest differentials and stuff. We actually talked about it a lot on Locked On Vikings After Dark. We also talked a lot about the schedule release videos that came out across the league. So if you're interested in those thoughts, you can check out Locked On Vikings After Dark, which the audio is, of course, up on this feed or on the YouTube channel, but you can also catch it live at 10 p.m. Central, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. But first things first here on Locked On Vikings, let's just go over what we think about the kind of stretches of the schedule. First up, the Vikings start with 2 NFC North tilts. At home against the Packers, and then they go to Soldier Field and play the Bears. That is a very high-octane way to start for me. Those divisional games, they always happen eventually, right? But to start it off with that, and especially the Packers, that's going to be charged. It's going to be emotional. It's going to be bumping in US Bank Stadium. And I think about the narrative of the Viking, right? Of the Vikings this year. It's going to be, hey, Kyler Murray's supposed to come in and fix everything, right? They didn't have the right quarterback. They didn't have the right GM. They'll have a new GM for that. They'll have a new quarterback. And you're going to kind of feel that sell of, okay, now, hey, all this potential with Justin Jefferson, Addison, Hawkinson, these bookend tackles. Look how high-flying this offense is supposed to be. Kevin O'Connell calling the plays, the Brian Flores defense. I do think the Vikings are going to catch a whole bunch of dark horse hype this offseason, and then they're going to go into their first game against a Packers team that under LaFleur, the whole time LaFleur's been the coach, the Packers have had a way of exposing that flaw you've been hiding from. I think it was LaFleur's first year was 2019, and the Vikings had this kind of offensive line that was playing okay, but getting away with murder a little bit, and then Zadarius Smith gets 5 sacks on Monday Night Football. I think of the blowout game in 2022 where a whole bunch of the Vikings flaws got exposed. They kind of have a way of shining that light right where you don't want it to be shined. And so you're kind of starting with that. And I think that's just the way LaFleur coaches, especially against a defense that's going to be young, a lot of people in their first game. But catching the Packers first is something that I am actually really excited about, both as a matchup, great fun way to start the season, always good TV there. But also there is the possibility, is what I'll say, of Micah Parsons starting the season on PUP, so you miss out on the Micah Parsons defense. And that Packers defense, with and without Micah Parsons, was drastically different. With Micah Parsons, they were a good defense by all accounts, becoming of a playoff team. Without them, they were if you just take all snaps where Micah Parsons was not on the field, or if you rather, the games where Micah Parsons wasn't available, because obviously, sometimes certain personnel packages are going to give up more yards if it's if it's the 30, the 3rd and 30 package or the 2-minute drill or whatever, and you have less linemen out or whatever. But if you take the Packers after from Parsons' injury onward and then split their performance down the middle there, or if you do a true on-off split with Micah Parsons. Either way, you get the same result. Without Parsons, it was a bottom 5 defense. And that is why they couldn't close the deal against the Bears in that wild card game. So if you can get that same kind of, shell of its former self defense that you got last year in week 1, you might kind of have a lucky break there, and then you just have to hope that everything that the Packers did this offseason to help that defense wasn't sufficient to kind of make up that difference, and you're going to kind of get that. But it's not even that. That's obviously helpful timing. Would much rather play the Packers without Parsons than with them. But it's also that whatever O'Connell and Kyler Murray are doing here is, I would imagine, different. And I would imagine that, in the event that it's JJ McCarthy too, it's still, I would hope, a pretty different approach. And so whoever gets the Vikings week 1 is going to have to go kind of by the seat of their pants. This is why week 1 is weird throughout the league. There's some degree of this to every team. Even teams with a ton of continuity are still going to add wrinkles and tweak things. But offensively and defensively with Flores, a lot is changing, I think, strategically for the Vikings this offseason, just based on personnel. And the Packers aren't going to have any tape on that except for whatever they can glean from the preseason. So that's helpful to me. I love that we're getting the Packers first. I love that we're starting at home first with, new quarterback, home opener, get that hype going, big Gallerhorn, like that's going to be great. And then they go into Soldier Field to play against the Bears. This is a rivalry that's been heating up a lot over the years, which I really love. And especially, last year, I think both teams are really upset that they split the series. Right? I think the Bears, and especially if you ask Bears fans, were 100%, 1,000,000% convinced the Bears are a way better team than the Vikings. They should kill them. But they were one kickoff return disaster, 1 2-minute drill away from getting swept the other way. And of course, the Vikings are going to be upset about that because what could have been, right? So I think there's a little beef to that one. And I think about that stretch, and then you go into a Buccaneers team, a Dolphins team, a Saints team, and a Colts team. I believe the Colts had a losing, So you go into 4 straight games against teams that had losing records last year, and the Week 6 bye is in there as well. So the start of the season is really interesting. I think those first 2 are going to set the tone for everything, rather than the first 6. I really think it's like contained to that first 2 games in the NFC North. Because right now, the goodwill about the Vikings is very attached to excitement about Kyler Murray, excitement about, young defenders from the draft and all that. And if you get smacked like the start of 2020, you get smacked at home by the Packers right away, all of that goodwill goes out the window. And now you're dealing with the same vibes that the Cardinals were dealing with Kyler Murray this time last year, where you're like, oh no, this guy is like not it. And now we got to just sit here and like hope that he becomes this like a way more consistent version of himself. And if you take that L and then you take an L against the Bears and you're 0-2 in the division, you're 0-2 generally, you start talking about, oh no, playoff odds are already dwindling and it's week 2. Our season lasted 8 days, everybody. The vibes go down the drain really bad. And barring a massive win streak, and yeah, those teams are all, teams that had losing records last year. But you still got to rattle a bunch off in a row, and that's hard. And barring this massive win streak, I do think that this schedule release feeds into my take that the very start of that Viking season is going to determine a lot about what the expectations have to be for the Vikings not to start bringing the firing gun back out. And whether they pointed at Kevin O'Connell or other assistants like Matt Daniels or Wes Phillips or whatever, sacrificial lambs, depends on a lot. But if Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings go 2-0 in that Packers-Bears stretch, I kind of think everybody's safe, kind of no matter what else happens, as long as it's not something biblical. I think everybody's super happy. And there is no better way for any new player, whether it's a rookie, Kyler Murray, somebody else, no better way to endear yourself to the Vikings than to kick the crap out of the Packers at home. Get everybody's tickets to the Vikings-Packers game, and you watch Kyler Murray or shoot, JJ McCarthy have some great game, right? Like imagine that scenario for a second where McCarthy took a big step in the offseason and he won the competition, or maybe Murray's not healthy or something like that. And McCarthy is playing that first game and he wins it and he plays well and he beat the Packers. Doesn't so much of the tension and frustration just melt away? And then you like kind of don't care what happens week 4 against the Dolphins. Like that's not going to be the thing that like decides it all. Really, those first 2 games feel like where so much pressure is on them. And then the stretch afterwards is like time to make up ground if it goes bad, or if it goes well, then suddenly you're looking at this slate of not as well regarded teams, and you're getting ahead in the standings, and then you can suddenly start getting really excited. But after that, after the Vikings get back from their bye, they play a noon game against the Colts at home, and then they get the hell stretch. We'll talk about the hell stretch next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Kalshi. The 2026 NFL schedule release is here. Now you can trade every game on Kalshi. Schedule releases always spark debates. Who's overrated, who's got a brutal stretch, and which teams are actually playoff contenders. Kalshi lets you trade on those predictions in a live market, from total wins to playoff chances and championship futures. On Kalshi, you can trade on real NFL questions like whether a team makes the playoffs or reaches a certain win total, and as the season outlook changes, you can buy in or out of your position live. It's available in all 50 states, so it's easy to jump in and follow along with the season. On Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there's no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy in and out of your position. Trade the draft pick, the game, and more on Kalshi. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use code LOCKEDON to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi. Kalshi. Trade on anything. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. If you want to skip the ads, go to Locked On Vikings Everydayer Club for $5 a month at lockedonvikings.supercast.com. You get every Locked On Vikings show ad-free, as well as access to a special Discord server where you can ping me whenever you want, ask me questions, we can cut it up, talk about more advanced stuff if you got other questions, and we can all level up together. Once again, that's at lockedonvikings.supercast.com. Moving on. The hell stretch. So this is the worst part of the season, I think, for the Vikings schedule. It's a 4-game stretch from week 8. They go into Detroit. Then they have a home game against the Bills, then into Lambeau, and then Mexico City against the 49ers. We talked a little bit yesterday about that international trip, but that coming at the end of such a brutal stretch, there is going to be a massive fatigue idea. Not to mention the Buffalo Bills game is a Monday nighter. So short week into Lambeau, and then taking that into an international game is going to be really, really difficult. And all of those teams are really good. The 49ers are the only ones of that group that didn't make the playoffs, and most people are going to chalk that up to injury. Now, the substation is still in San Francisco, so who knows what state they'll be in by week 11, but that's neither here nor there. 2 primetime games, 4 massive opponents. That is going to be, I think it's going to be seen 2 ways and kind of that diverge on that first couple of games. So if they do well in those first couple of games, right, go 1-1 and it feels good, or 2-0, our mouths to God's ears. And then they kind of, no matter what happens in that next stretch, because so many of those teams are not going to be given the respect I think that they're due as NFL teams, so beating them won't give the Vikings a lot of credit. They could go into this and have people talking before that Lions game are like, okay, here's the test. We're going to find out if the Vikings are for real. And that's going to be how it goes. And if they lose early, they go 0-2 or a 1-1 that feels bad, the next 5 games aren't going to do a lot to turn around a narrative, right? If they go 0-2 against the Packers and Bears, and then they beat a bunch of teams that didn't make the playoffs, then everybody's going to go, well, they beat up on the bad teams, but what are they going to do against someone who's for real? And then I think that's what you're talking about going into Lions, Bills, Packers, 49ers. Either way, it is a proving ground. And that's what the schedule is. It's interesting that a lot of the hardest games, at Lions, at Packers, that was always going to be tough. Bills at home, going to be tough. You got at Patriots a couple weeks after this. That was always one of the tougher ones on the schedule, at least going in. And that you're kind of clumping all of these games up in right smack dab in the middle of the season. This is the Vikings' chance to, I think, in front of the nation, 2 of these games are going to be on prime time, and go in front of the nation and kind of show everybody what they are made of. Either prove them right if they're getting a ton of hype, or prove them wrong if they started 0-2, but then they rattled off 4 wins, 4 or 5 wins. Maybe they're 5-2 going into this, but everybody still kind of thinks they suck because they started slow. And then, hey, go beat the Lions, go play well against the Bills, go play well against the 49ers on Monday night and Sunday night football games in 2 primetime in 3 weeks. Go do that, and you're going to be super, super stoked. And then if they are 5-2, but then they fall apart in this stretch, and let's say they go 1-3, right? Well, that would put them at 6-5. They'd still have a winning record, but boy, it would feel like the Vikings aren't really going anywhere, right? It's just all going to be about that vibe and that like perception. But moving on with the rest of the kind of schedule, the rest of this like in chunks, you then have at home a home streak, Falcons nooner, Panthers afternoon game. Couple of interesting games there against presumably young quarterbacks. I don't know what the Falcons are doing. I don't know if it's going to be Penix or Tua. Might not even be up to them with the injury histories of those guys. And then you have at this point 4 of 5 games at home. And in fact, when the Vikings go to Mexico City, this is one of the quirks of the schedule I thought was fascinating. When the Vikings go to Mexico City, that is going to be, they will have 2 road games left on their schedule. And that's a neutral site game. So that Mexico City trip is basically like that Lambeau to Mexico City road game thing, right? At Detroit, at Green Bay, in Mexico City. That's a big road trip. And then they're basically US Bank Stadium all the way back, except for 1 trip to Boston for the Patriots, 1 trip to New York for the Jets at the end. But that's, Thanksgiving weekend, you got 2 road games left by Thanksgiving weekend. That's a pretty great way for a dome team to close things out. It's going to be probably cold to go play in New York. It's probably going to be cold to play the Patriots on December 10th. But everything else, you get to be in the nice cushy dome of US Bank Stadium and finish things kind of on your own terms. And so this is where I can kind of talk about this. I think the schedule makers were kind here. And I'm talking more about how I predict the narrative to go, whether the Vikings are good or bad, just because that's the way I kind of think through this. But the actual way to like evaluate how did schedule release day go for the Vikings? You look at rest differentials, you look at travel and stuff like that. And this is pretty favorable for the Vikings. So they have a positive rest differential. That means that they are going to have the advantage more often than they're going to have the disadvantage. It was the opposite last year. So we're happy about that. They're going to have the advantage in 4 different games this year, including the game where they're coming off of their bye, but they've got some opponents coming off of like Monday nighters and stuff. Or they'll have a rest advantage. For example, they play Thursday night football, short week on the road against the Patriots, and then that'll give them a rest advantage against the Lions in a pivotal divisional game on Sunday night football at home against Detroit. Those kinds of things are, as with all things, right? It's not always going to be good, but I think they get more good than bad there. And that's pretty nice. It's distributed so that they get to be in the dome when it starts getting cold out, and all their road games, they go to Chicago on September 20th. It might be hot that day, right? And the road games where they do have to play outside are Mexico City in November. That's probably going to be plenty good weather. They do go to Lambeau in November. Maybe it's going to be like chilly, but not snowy, not, oh my God, the weather's going to be crazy and killing. This is like a rainstorm or something. Can never do anything about that. At Tampa Bay, week 3, that's probably going to be hot. And for a team when you are a dome team, when you're an indoor football team, that is something that always, you kind of can get screwed on that, right? Like it would be really rough for the Vikings to end a season at Soldier at Lambeau, where they would have like big disadvantages because of the weather and the home teams being more used to playing in it, like the Vikings used to enjoy when they were an outdoor team. Can you tell I'm bitter about it? And I'm bitter about decisions that got made before I was born, and I will always be. And I know people who are old enough to remember that. Most of you agree with me in my experience. So they get a positive rest differential. But I'm just looking at like the pivotal travel moments, right? You get like week 2, week 3, you go into Chicago, into Tampa Bay. Both of those are Sunday games. Not too crazy of a road trip, right? No Thursday night West Coast. They do have a Thursday night road game, but it's on the East Coast. And that is significantly easier time-wise when you have a short week and a rest disadvantage and all that. I'll call it a rest challenge, a fatigue challenge. West Coast, way harder than East Coast, just the way the timing is. And the Vikings have never gone on the road to the West Coast and won in I don't even know if they've won in a night game. Definitely not a Thursday night game, but I don't even know. I can think of a couple of like Sunday night football games in Seattle that they lost. So I don't know. Check me on that. But definitely not a Thursday night game. Thursday night West Coast, it's been like last year's Chargers game or that one crazy Rams game where Jared Goff threw a million passes to like Todd Gurley and Cooper Kupp and killed Mike Zimmer. The game in the Sam Darnold 2024 year where Christian Darrisaw got hurt was a Thursday nighter on the West Coast. Those are all rough. So if we have to do Thursday night prime time and go on the road, I'd rather it be out east. And so like those little details are the things that I'm looking for here. And from a like travel perspective, the hardest road trip is going to be Lambeau to Mexico City. They get to follow that up by playing 5 of their last 7 games at home, including 4 of 5. And the only difficult road trip is that Thursday night out to the Patriots, and they got 2 home games on either side of it. So that pivotal final, that last stretch of the season, the back half of the season, travel and rest are going to be really, really favorable to the Vikings, and we can be thankful for that. And as always, those last 4 games are probably going to be decisive for the season unless we get real extreme results early in big win streaks or losing streaks. So let's talk about how that could look next on Locked On Vikings. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are underway and every possession matters. So if you're looking to get even closer to the action, FanDuel has a great offer to get you started. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right. Turn just $5 into $150 in bonus bets just for getting started. Love using FanDuel during the playoffs because everything you need is right there in one place. You can check stats, trends, and matchups before the games, which makes the whole experience feel a lot more informed, and track that during the game if you want to place a live bet. The app is really easy to navigate and makes playoff basketball even more engaging from start to finish. So if you want to put an emotional hedge on the San Antonio Spurs winning Game 6 and eliminating the Timberwolves just days after what happened to the Wild, you can do that. Put $5 down, and if it happens, at least you get your $150 in bonus bets. You're leaving here with something. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. This episode is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Have you ever looked at your bank account and then been completely caught off guard by all of the bad and horrible decisions you were making? Well, don't wallow in it. Fix it. With Rocket Money, you can take control of your finances all in one place. It'll put it all there in front of you so you can see what you've been subscribed to, what's been draining money out of your account month after month that you maybe aren't even using, that you don't want to continue, or that maybe you even just straight up forgot about. It automatically categorizes your spending so you can actually see where your money is going. You can set budgets, get alerts, and stay on top of upcoming bills. It just makes everything feel more organized and gives you a clearer picture of your finances day to day so you don't get overwhelmed by trying to track all your subscriptions manually and figure out your spending and keeping up with your bills. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Moving on with the Locked On Vikings podcast, the last 4 games of the season are decisive most of the time. Not really this last year. They were eliminated by then because things had started, they start 4-8, right? If they start 4-8 again, we won't be talking about these nearly as much. But usually it either matters because you're close enough to being in the hunt, unless you're one of the bottom 5 teams, right? You're close enough to being in the hunt where these games matter, or you're so far in it that it starts to matter for playoff seeding and stuff, right? So we'll probably be very locked in on that Lions game after the Vikings get a mini bye. They play Sunday Night Football at home. Maybe that'll be the whiteout. I don't know what the whiteout will be, but that's a pretty good candidate for it. Also, the Commanders, I think, would be a pretty good candidate for the whiteout, which is the next game, which is TBA scheduling. We don't know when that's going to be. That's one of those that they can flex any game for. If the Commanders and the Vikings are like fighting for a wild card spot, they might put that on Sunday Night Football. But the Vikings do have already 4 primetime games. The Monday Nighter against the Bills, Mexico City against the 49ers will be Sunday Night Football. Then they have 2 prime times in a row at Patriots and then the Lions Thursday night and then Sunday Night Football against the Lions. So that would be a 5th and a 6th. And that, of course, that only happens if these teams are all in it, right? Otherwise, people will probably have seen enough of the Vikings, considering they will have been on prime time for 4 of 7 weeks in a row, from week 9 to week 15, 4 times. They will be in prime time. So whatever iteration the Vikings have found, that is what the nation is going to see. It's different. I kind of made this declaration last year, and it turned out to be pretty prescient, which is whatever happened early in the season was going to define J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings more than what happened late. And I think we probably can't argue against that, right? The worst games happened early. The best games happened late. The worst games are what have defined J.J. McCarthy in just about everybody's eyes. Nobody watched that game against the Commanders, where he played really well. So it's kind of the same thing here. When you're on prime time, if you're going to be on prime time 4 times over the span of 2 months, people are going to get to know whatever the Vikings are by then. So if by week 8, one of the quarterbacks is hurt and the other one's the only one playing, or if both of the quarterbacks are hurt and they're scrambling, or if, injuries have had, or if they're super healthy and they're playing great, and whatever is going on in those games, that is going to define those games. But those are difficult opponents. Bills, 49ers, Patriots, Lions. Those are difficult opponents that will test the Vikings. Of course, like primetime games are going to be difficult opponents. They don't put the bad teams on primetime very often. Or at least they don't try to. So that's going to be the stretch that I think, when all is said and done, is going to drive whatever the narrative is of the Vikings quite a bit. So if Kyler Murray's killing it during that time, then that's great. But if Murray does the thing he did so often in Carolina, or in Arizona, where, he plays the first 8 games brilliantly and then falls apart at the end, he's not going to get a lot of credit for those early games if he doesn't play well in the primetime games, or if one of those has to be McCarthy, and then whatever happens there is going to drive his narrative more. And then the same thing would go for if the Commanders or Bears games get put into primetime. Those we don't know the timing of yet. But obviously they're both home games. Home against the Commanders should be really interesting. Wherever the Commanders are at in their season at that point, could kind of see anything. Really difficult team to predict. And then you go into New York to play the Jets, whatever's going on with them right now. And then ending the season at home against the Bears, as is the time-honored tradition. It's been a couple years, but we're back to basics, and ending the season against the Bears. That game almost certainly will be pivotal. Said that last year about the Packers game too. It turned out not to be. You just hope that doesn't happen. I would love to see the Bears out of it and not care, like the good old days when you would get a Bears team that was already mentally in Cancun, and then you needed to win that to get the bye, in 2017, and you could just hang 40 on them and nobody would care. That was always the best. Loved that. I would love to see that come back. Probably not going to see that with the NFC North as it is now. But this is going to be a difficult NFC North to predict, I think. There's a lot of reasons. And I said this exact same thing last year, and I don't think my feelings on it have changed, that the NFC North, everybody has their reason that you could say, oh, these guys are going to blow up and it's going to be their year. And every single one of these teams has a reason to think, oh, no, these guys could end up in the cellar. And I think if you went into last year, I was probably the only person, because I was saying the exact same thing, and that went for the Lions. And that probably just by default made me the only person willing to entertain the idea of the Lions ending up in 4th place. And then sure enough, they did on tiebreakers. Wasn't that, not really, but it wasn't like they had a 5-win season or anything like that. But you could see, oh, they're going to take a step back because of their coordinator and they lost Frank Ragnow and stuff. And what's that going to mean? And Gosh, you go team by team and you just look at like, well, will the Bears take that like step back now that people have seen the Ben Johnson thing happen? Will they have a new gear to kick into? Will the Packers have a new gear to kick into, even though they like experienced these losses and Micah Parsons isn't healthy? And, will Jonathan Gannon be the answer for them? And will the Lions be able to, overcome the big losses they had last offseason? Will the ads they made this offseason be enough to overcome it? Even all these questions and then questions about the Vikings we've been asking a ton here. Will Kyler Murray actually work with Kevin O'Connell? Will that defense be able to still take a step forward despite losing a lot of their veteran leadership? And like all of these questions make it so that all four teams have huge ranges to me. They're like everything is so difficult to predict. Don't come to me asking for an NFC North prediction. I do not have a serious one. I'll probably end up giving one on like radio shows or something because they always ask, and I'll probably just go on like whatever mood I'm in at the moment, and I'll give way different answers depending on like what day you get me on. So if you run a radio show and you listen to Locked On Vikings podcast, please have me on your radio show. I will give you a prediction and not really mean it, which is great for sports radio. I will talk to you all next week, and as always, Skol.